Welcome. I'm Harmony Slater, your host of the Finding Harmony podcast. Over the past 20 years, I've taught thousands of yoga teachers and students to explore the intersection between ancient wisdom and modern everyday life, using mind-body practices to heal, awaken, and manifest their dreams from the inside out. This podcast is a sanctuary for those feeling overwhelmed by life's challenges. Are you ready to jump in and discover how these challenges aren't actually in the way, but are the way to finding harmony? Let's invite the magic back in. Hi, welcome to the Finding Harmony podcast. With Easter right around the corner, we could not think of a better person to talk to than our dear friend John Campbell, Dr. John Campbell. I know that you know and love him, as he was one of your favorite episodes and one of our favorite episodes way back in 2020. And we wanted to chat with him again because he is a scholar of Indo-Tibetan Buddhism, and he holds a PhD in religion from Columbia University, and is just so insightful with so much wisdom and knowledge and life experience. And we wanted to talk to him about our tendency as Westerners to project our Jesus complex onto our teachers. And so we're diving in deep here with philosophy, psychology, and looking at some of the tendencies we have and the patterns that keep us stuck. And when we do project this savior aspect onto our teacher, what happens? Eventually, they get pulled off the pedestal and it all comes crumbling down. I know you're going to love this episode with John. He's such an amazing human being, an amazing practitioner and teacher. And if you want to practice with him, you can find him at the Newburgh Yoga Shala up in New York. I would go practice with him if I was on the East Coast. So head on over to Newburgh in New York and enjoy John's teachings there. But if you're not on the East Coast, you can just listen to this episode and dive right in with us as we enjoy spending time with John Campbell right here, right now on the Finding Harmony podcast. Hi, welcome to the Finding Harmony podcast. I'm here with Harmony and Russell Case.
Do you always say that? I'm here with Harmony and Russell Case.
Did I say that?
You did.
Oh my
God.
gosh.
No, it's
but I like
fine.
that. I like that. It's sort of a certain awareness of the transparency of self. If you refer to yourself in the third person, because you are here with Harmony, and that's really cool.
True.
What we're going to do today, guys, is I have a series of quotes.
We have to introduce.
That's what I'm doing right now. What we're going to do today, Harmony's off her meds, I'm sorry, but we have a series of quotes I'm going to be throwing out there. And what I'm relying on today's episode is for the guests today and the host to spontaneously improvise their responses.
Okay.
Recently, I texted an old friend of ours
Who's with us now.
And I said to him, what are your thoughts on Jesus? And so today, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about his thoughts on Jesus. And I have a quote here, and this is the first of many quotes. Debuting in June 1938's Action Comics #1, Superman was the brainchild of two Jewish teenagers, Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster. Kal-El is his name. El, of course, means God in Hebrew.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I love that.
That's not surprising, but I did not know that. That's cool.
Did you know that our guest today, do you know what his initials are?
JC, Dr. John Campbell. We have Jesus Christ on the podcast today. So I want to ask you what I was rolling as I was imagining you receiving this text. I can't imagine what you thought when you received it.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, I take it in stride because it was coming from you. I think for some reason, this is obviously an aside, but comically, And for some reason, I've gotten myself on a MAGA text list. So I regularly get messages from Don Jr. and Don Jr. likes to update me on the latest outrages and reasons to be shocked and appalled and calls to action and things like that. So when I hear from Russell K saying like, what are your thoughts on Jesus? I just kind of just rolls off my back,
You just roll with it. You're like, I wonder what he's into these days.
Yeah, I'm intrigued. I was wondering like if there was going to be some follow-up, like what's on your mind there, sir? Because as you well know, there's a time-honored tradition of Jews becoming Christians, including Jesus
himself became a Christian. Yeah.
And so if that is sort of like where you're, I don't know what's going on in your life, but I kind of doubt it. But please, by all means, we can talk about that.
Well, what I want to talk about, Harmony and I have been talking a lot about trying to figure out our community and trying to figure out what is it, what's going on with it, what's been happening. And I feel like one of the things that we've kind of been twiddling with is this kind of notion that maybe that there's a Christ projection onto yoga and onto the yoga teacher, onto ourselves. And that I have a definition of projection here that I thought I could read.
He's always so prepared.
I know. He prepared specially for this one.
Psychological projection is a defense mechanism in which the ego defends itself against unconscious impulses or qualities.
Well, let's just unpack that definition for a second.
Let's do that.
So,
let's unpack that.
What the definition is saying is that there's something unconscious in us, whether it's a desire or a quality, and it might even be about ourselves. And instead of acknowledging it, good or bad, we project it onto someone else. So then we have, these fun sayings that come like, if you spot it, you got it, right? Or
if you smelt it, dealt it.
I was thinking more like if you smelt it, dealt it. Yeah, but same
thing. Yeah.
So I guess I'll shift into the role of the group therapist here. So what brings this to mind in particular, because as you know, I'm recently re-engaging with the world of yoga and yoga teaching. I mean, I never stopped doing my yoga practice, but it's only kind of a recent thing that I started teaching again. And so you posed the sort of broader question, what's up? Something about identifying our community. Is that how you said it?
Very nice.
And that has something to do with projection and, so please.
Well, I think we're looking at this idea that students tend to take maybe our own tradition from the West or our own understanding of wanting a Superman or a savior. And rather than going inside to find that savior or Superman, Superwoman,
just Supergirl. There's no Superwoman.
Super person.
There's no Superwoman, strangely. There's just Supergirl.
Right. We project that onto a teacher or a guru or a master.
And we have expectations on that person that isn't. There's a sutra for this, isn't there? When you see a rope on the ground, but actually it's a snake, or vice versa. You see a rope and you think it's a snake, but actually it's just a rope. And so it's the seeing a delusion instead of the truth. Which sutra is this, guys? You guys are like scholars, right?
That's not really a yoga sutra. If you're talking about yoga sutra, that's not there, but it's, of course, it's the classic example of the misperception and the imposition of something that isn't there. So you can still have a very strong emotional reaction to something that just isn't even there at all, which is this snake, because you believe that it's there.
Right. Yeah.
So So what I'm hearing you talk about is how people, particularly in the process of yoga, that there's a lot of projection on the teachers. Of course, there's like this tradition of revering teachers and gurus and so forth. So is that kind of that's what's on your mind, and the cult of personality?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Like you've seen
Yeah.
How do
carried
we get out of this
Well,
pattern, John?
well, I'm not sure that's exactly where we're going to
No.
go. Are we
I
going
don't
to fix
know.
it?
Well, no, maybe there's some ways.
Well, I feel like that there's something there where I want to identify it.
You want to identify what that is?
I want to identify what that is. That, I want to
That
look
tendency.
at the tendency. Yeah. Before we fix it, I want to identify it.
Mhm.
That if you walk into a room and you have an idea, you have an ingrained habit of thought that a Jesus figure will save you. And you've been conditioned to believe that a Jesus figure or a Superman will save you. But that's very different than if, say, a Marxist walks into a room believing that education of the masses and education of the workers will save us. And so it's a very different projection or a very different personality that walks into the yoga room at that point. They're going to relate to the yoga teacher, or, you're in Newbury. Is that where you are, John?
Newberg.
Newberg. I'm going to walk into Newberg with a very different way of relating to John as teacher. I mean, either I could treat him as the deity, treat him as the savior, or I can treat him as a person who I think is going to, educate everyone in the room. But I'm also looking at him through a lens that totally obscures or distorts what John is. I can barely see him at all for what he is in the room.
Yeah. I mean, what goes on, in a yoga class, of course, is no different than what goes on in any other human environment, any other environment where beings are functioning and motivated by the combination of their habit, as you called it, like habit patterns. And the most fundamental habit pattern is the systematic attachment and aversion to everything that we encounter. And that attachment and aversion itself is predicated according to yoga. I guess I'm going to use it sort of generically, say yoga philosophy, because I think you can safely say that whether it's, Patanjali classical yoga philosophy or Buddhist Dharma presentation, certainly Advaita Vedanta saying the same thing, which is that attachment and aversion is based upon something fundamentally misconstrued about reality. The same way that you misconstrue the snake that isn't there on the rope, that arguably maybe is there, maybe it isn't there, but there is something there, you're responding to it, and you're superimposing some kind of mistake. And the most basic mistake is the idea that they exist from their own side, that they are robustly exactly what you think they are. So I respond to you as somebody who is desirable, whatever you keep calling it, Jesus, like, let's say just celebrity, attractive. You seem to have everything that I want, very appealing. And like Harmony, you already said, practically what this turns into is a habit of seeking transformation by controlling external conditions. So I see this person who is very attractive to me, like there's something about them, and I think it's really their qualities. It's really them. It's their, from their own side, they are inherently desirable. If I could be more like that, if I could get more of that, then my problems would be all solved. So then the more that I invest in that, the more that I, buy into that notion that they are actually everything that I think they are, rather than understanding them as being part of a sort of a network, a process of causes and conditions that at that moment seem to position them in a very, glamorous or appealing light to me. But if those conditions were to change, I could turn on a dime and then you would become something repulsive to me. The underlying problem is that I think that all of these qualities they exist externally from their own side, as opposed to being some experience that is a result of my own mind and its habit patterns of attachment and aversion and the underlying ignorance. That ignorance is that you are permanently and essentially the way you are, or that I am. So in terms of going into a yoga class, of course, everybody goes in there. They want to change something. Mostly people would like to go and change something, or they want to feel good. And
which is also changing something, because
right,
you're not happy with your current state. So you're like, I want to feel better.
Yes, you want to feel better and find that happy state and remain in that happy state. But as long as that's predicated upon avoiding some undesirable state, then you're always in this struggle. If you can game the system so that you're organizing things only so that you feel positive and, reinforcingly good experiences, then they will continue. But eventually your good luck is going to run out. And so a lot of our traditions that I sort of digressed, and the traditions say that underlying all of this is something that is essential about who we really truly are, which is perfect as we are. So yeah, it's a bit of it's a trap, it's a trap that we all seem to stumble into. I don't think it's exclusively or uniquely like a modern phenomenon either. It's just
I think it's quite human.
I think it's quite human. Yes.
Yeah.
So where did the Jesus thing come in, though? Could I press you a little bit on that? Like,
sure.
What was your idea? Like, because you don't come from a real Jesus background, do you?
I did convert to Presbyterianism when I was 12.
Really?
I was very into the pastor David Bianchian. He had a way of taking a fable and making it applicable to my daily life. And that was a hook for me. I was like, oh, I like that. Literature's cool, you know? And so that, it reminds me of what you just said about the teacher being glamorous, the teacher being someone that you're attracted to. The teacher's cool. You project onto the teacher a desire to be like that. I want to be like that, which is not possible. You will always just be whatever you are. And even that is up for interpretation. It's ineffable, what we are. And so you asked, how did I get to Superman or Jesus from that? I was thinking about how we look at the teacher and maybe they become a kind of archetype of not just cool, but like a kind of deeply rooted psychological archetype that we pursue or see. And I was thinking of maybe Joseph Campbell's The Hero's Journey, or A Hero with a Thousand Faces. Like, this is one of those faces where we encounter the hero,
right? And
we see the hero and we say, yes, that is who I'm going to put up on a pedestal, because I also want to be up on the pedestal with them when the shit goes down and the Civil War starts. I'm going to be with that guy, or this guy is going to save, they're going to save us in some way. So there's a quote here for Joseph Campbell. A hero is someone who has given his or her life to something bigger than oneself. A simple definition that's the profound gateway to Campbell's famous breakdown of the hero's journey. And I thought, well, that's so interesting, because not only are we putting someone up on a pedestal, I think especially as ethnic Europeans, is not only are we putting them up on a pedestal and saying, that's our hero, that's the person that's going to fix everything, which suggests that, I don't have to. They're going to do it for me. And that's going to fix all of the complications in my life. So I'm not only going to put them up on a pedestal, but they're also going to make a sacrifice. They're going to give their life for something bigger than oneself. And I was like, oh, that's just like Jesus. Jesus
Wow.
also made that kind of sacrifice. And so this person who I've projected as the hero who's going to save me
Right.
is also going to crucify themselves for me.
Right.
And I'm pretty sure that's going to end in disappointment.
Wow. Well, I mean, I don't even, yeah, I don't even know where to begin. Like, that's a really fascinating, line of thought. I feel like, because of the opportunity for our conversation, I need to somehow relate that back to what also, I guess it was Harmony, you said about what's going on and what's the state of our community or something like that. I don't know. And I certainly don't have the answer to that. But here's a sort of a simple idea that maybe yoga practice is supposed to be about transformation. And that's unapologetically about transformation. We're doing things in order to create certain effects. And in the transformative systems of yoga, there's always like some behavioral components. There's a yama and niyama there, or, the Eightfold Path. There's like right livelihood, right speech. There's ways of like actually disciplining the way that you engage in the world so that you start to create good consequences from your actions and minimize harm that you're doing to others. So if you do see somebody who's really like exemplary in their behavior, it seems to me that's not a bad thing, at all, to be inspired by them and want to actually be like them. I'm sure I'm throwing this out. I don't know this, but I can almost guarantee that there are people like who have followed you, Harmony, like as an online entity, never met you.
Yeah.
Probably know these people, and they're super inspired, and it has helped them greatly in their lives because they've embraced some change, some really important changes. They're dedicated to a practice every day, revisiting that practice every day, and they do it to a certain extent. I mean, it's sort of like a useful con, a useful
Yeah.
myth, because they really think like, I'm doing this because Harmony is somehow better than me.
Yeah.
Somehow, I'm improving myself. But the underlying premise there is that you are essentially better than them. And, but, maybe like I said, as a useful white lie, that's okay.
Yeah.
Because it provides that kind of motivation. And it also opens up the horizon of expectation of like, where could they go with life? When you start to talk about transformation, this is a very essential point for any kind of yoga system, right? I'm not saying this just to like show off and use jargon. This is actually kind of useful if you look at the Sanskrit word for practice, yoga practice. One word for it anyway. One way we talk about it is sadhana, right? This word sadhana.
Yeah. And
the Sanskrit word, which sometimes can mean like an actual like liturgical script. It can mean a performance, like a play, So
Yeah.
I start with a certain opening up of making an intention and addressing a lineage of educators and giving praise to them, making mental offerings to them, and then like doing this transformative practice, whatever that entails. And then finally at the end, dedicating that effort and saying, oh, well, let that effort be to somebody's benefit. So that could be sadhana. But the word sadhana, based upon the Sanskrit root word sad, which means to achieve. So sadhana, as it is understood grammatically, it means a means of achieving something. Okay. That's pretty clear. But it immediately begs the question, well, achieve what? Right?
Yeah.
So you need to there's an X variable there that needs to be, I shouldn't say this, that it needs to be deliberately filled in. It is going to be filled in. If you don't deliberately implant some kind of goal, which they call the sadhya, the thing to be achieved, right? The sadhana is the thing that, means of achievement, sadhya, thing to be achieved. If you don't actually deliberately say, this is what I hope to achieve, then what's the default? The default is your most riotous, state of attachment and aversion mind, your monkey mind of attachment and aversion. I keep using those stock phrases, but basically
whatever you desire or whatever you're averting, like whatever's strongest in you in a way, it sounds like.
Whatever is strongest, right? And so when we start with our practice, and maybe even throughout practice, we're encouraged to kind of keep recalibrating and reorienting ourselves to what is it that we really hope to be achieving through this. So somebody who is, when you get into like deep guru practice, like where the guru is supposed to represent the actual manifestation of enlightenment, that's a very, very deep, heavy, and radical form of identification with some essential enlightened quality in oneself, and obviously has this terrible danger of becoming just cultish and relinquishing all sorts of self-power, and I think you already spoke about that, Russell. People are just dying to have somebody tell them what to do.
Literally,
they're just dying for someone to control them and like give them a person. They love it. They absolutely love it. We all love it. The problem is that, I guess it just is sort of there's a certain comfort in being a slave.
Yeah.
But it is slavery, it is ultimately not, the point being that any kind of yoga system is about being free. So it's not about being like more relaxed and less stressed out as being a person in bondage. Like you're still in prison, but at least your blood pressure is lower.
Yeah. Right.
Okay, how about you were just getting out of prison? So to follow up, just and wrap that train of thought up. So you got your means of achieving something. Presumably you've got like a goal to achieve. If you don't, it's like somebody in a rowboat with a single oar who's just like wildly rowing away, furiously rowing and going in circles. Let's say you do then orient yourself to a destination, which is, say, the transformation and rehabituation to being a person who, you've identified that these certain afflictive emotional states, you want to apply the antidote, which is to behave, with kindness and compassion and open-heartedness. And you start to achieve that. But any of these yoga systems always say, you leave the boat behind, right? And then you proceed.
Walking on the water. Yeah.
Going back to the idea, and the finishing thought is like going back to this like projection on a person. So that person may actually be a great inspiration to them, as long as you get to sort of this maturation point of saying like, yeah, actually, she's just an image in my head.
So much of what you said here is so like juicy, but I had this thought, and I think that this is something that we don't talk about a lot in yoga is having a goal. And a lot of yoga practitioners, I think, kind of are like, don't want to make a goal. They sort of resist having a goal. Like, well, I'm just going to do my practice and all is coming, kind of waiting for the goal to show up for them in a way, right? But I think that reframing the practice this way is quite beautiful, because it gives you a point to move to. And exactly your analogy there of taking the boat to the other shore, right? And then you leave the boat and you move on, whether it's by foot or by plane or train or another boat. You need to keep progressing and keep moving forward. When you reach a goal, you make another goal, right? Yeah. And that's what helps us to grow, rather than what you're saying is just doing your sadhana without having any real point of focus. And then you're never really going anywhere. And you don't know if you're even making steps towards a place that you want to go, because there was no real concrete destination in mind to begin with.
Yeah.
And I think that's really essential, actually, because it allows you to then do exactly what you're talking about, is like see the transformation. You can say like, look how far I've come.
Right.
Or, oh, this teacher was wonderful for this part of my journey, and now I'm moving on to another part of my journey. Like, it kind of gives you power back to have a focus point for your practice or for your spiritual discipline, whatever that discipline is. And it also kind of creates stages to the journey or to the spiritual progress or the practice progress, whatever it is. And without that, I do think you're kind of like lost and adrift a little bit. And that's where you maybe are more susceptible to this cult of personality or people who are going to tell you exactly what your purpose is and what you need to do and where you need to go. And you have to just keep doing this and this and this forever and ever and ever and till you die. You know,
having a goal is really key. Like, you eventually you're going to start, acquiring guns and water and land and a compound, and then everyone has a purpose. And when they're coming for you, then everyone can, commit suicide together. Those are all goals.
Yeah, well, that's the goal.
It's a really creative construction. One thing that I really loved what you said, John, was that you kind of saw the point of anxiety in the message that I was relaying about the hero. It's like, there's an anxiety there about whether or not a hero is appropriate.
Yeah.
But you present such a lovely way of saying, well, this is someone who has achieved and is a model for us for achievement. And then we have a path towards a goal or a goal line or a marker. And that can be really helpful for practice. And I thought that was really beautifully illustrated.
Well, I've known both of you for a long time. I know a little bit about your backgrounds and lives, and I feel like all of us came to yoga in a similar way, as I guess typical modern people who encountered this very powerful transformative system in a kind of free-floating, we encountered it in a way where it was certainly associated with a tradition because of the teacher who we were close to, but we weren't actually in his tradition.
Yeah.
I mean, you would be deluded to think that by practicing Ashtanga yoga with Pattabhi Jois or any of these wonderful South Indian teachers, masterful South Indian teachers, that you would somehow become part of that world. You weren't part of that world. And that's a unique modern challenge. Going back to what, Harmony, you mentioned that, do your practice all is coming kind of notion, which I heard, our teacher say many times, but I think from his worldview, that was of course, perfectly coherent, which is this, profound devotion and belief in God that was present in all things and everywhere, and that you would eventually come to harmonize with that. And it was both, for me, the fact that I could get a contact high from that devotional experience that clearly he had or his community had, but I wasn't actually part of that community. So then that kind of helped me, talking about stages of practice and where you go. For me, that led me to an appreciation of how powerful the tools are, the yoga tools that we're using, but also kind of reoriented me to the importance of the very, very fundamental groundwork of a spiritual practice, asking some very basic questions. Why am I doing this? What I hope to get out of it. And rather than say, you can only do yoga as a spiritual practice and you have to have some sort of grand metaphysical objective, which I don't think at all. I think that it's important for us to make a distinction, which I believe, for example, Pattabhi Jois would make. I interpreted this, is that part of the yoga is really just like an Ayurvedic practice. It's a therapeutic, we frequently referred to it as you can do it without any spiritual, if such a thing exists, you can just do it and it's good for your body and your nervous system and your, it'll balance your hormones, and all of that is absolutely essential because you want to take care of this precious human rebirth. But why? What are you going to do with it? And so for me, the questions of what am I going to do with it, of course, I'm not sure I even, can answer what I'm going to do with it. But for me anyway, Buddhist Dharma has presented that in a very clear way, that simply working on my body and making it more healthy and making it more, like is a trap. It's a total illusion. It's a mirage that it would, have any long-term benefit. I'm now in my later 50s. Things are getting, they get harder. I promise you.
If it wasn't hard already, it gets harder.
They were already hard. Exactly. Yeah. But anyway, so, just to state the obvious, that we're all in a gradual process of our bodies experiencing our impermanence. The yoga practices can be a wonderful opportunity to withdraw one's fixation and preoccupation with attachment and aversion to things which really can't bring, lasting well-being and any kind of contentment. But for me, yes, there's a sort of like, it's still to this day, still simply feels good without setting an intention or anything like that, any kind of, mental effort. I still will actually feel very good doing my yoga practice. But that's just because it works, it just happens to be like this very effective set of therapeutic interventions for this person. That's basically my project now. It's like, how do I incorporate that into a robust spiritual life where I can live in the best possible way? I don't have the answer to that at all. And I feel like every time I run it, like I get an invitation to talk to you guys or start to teach at BB's yoga studio, I feel like I keep getting these opportunities. Like I keep fucking it up, but I keep getting a chance to try again, start again, start from, like just try it again, see, for some, like my view is that we put ourselves forward to be of greatest service as we can and express and build our capacity for loving and compassion, and fail miserably again and again and again and again. Yeah. And we get to try it again as long as we still have breath. But we're going to stop having breath. And so we need to be prepared for that too.
Yeah. Good stuff. When you use words like spiritualist and therapeutics together in the same sentence, I immediately am washed with like images of the 19th century theosophists who are bringing ancient yogis into their European seance circles to try and raise the dead. And like, these therapeutics are very good for you. And yet, as when they would bring these fakirs, these fakers, around the elite social circles of the 19th century, they were actually good for them, which was, unexpected. An unexpected consequence of bringing yoga into European society was it is actually helpful. And it reminds me of something that you and I did together in speaking of, trying to imagine how our future lives could be useful for us. When we really got together, we were under the patronage of Paul Tudor Jones, and we were going to improve the lives of youths by inoculating them or subjugating them, vaccinating them with yoga. We're going to just give them a little vaccination of yoga and mindfulness, because we had to use mindfulness because yoga was off limits, because all Sanskrit was off limits in that environment, because it was, and in my little selection of quotes here, I have something that relates to that. I had the impression.
Does he do this every time, Harmony? Does he just come up with all
special? I used to do this every time, but this is really special for you.
I'm honored.
I was under the impression that when I had met Paul at his house with Gene Ruffin, our guide in this organization, he made several references to it. He had just seen, it seems, the film Waiting for Superman.
Okay.
Do you remember that film at all?
I don't think I saw that. No.
It's a film about charter schools And Gene had
it rings a bell.
suite of of 12 charter schools down in Florida. And so he was the right person for this work. The filmmaker Jeffrey Canada describes his journey as an educator and recounts the story of his devastation when, as a child, he discovers that Superman is fictional. And there is no one coming with enough power to save us. And so Canada's essential take is that since there is no Superman, we should just blow up the entire school system. And sometimes a lot of educators say this, we should just blow it up and start from scratch. And then send our kids to charter schools, which is the inherent bias of the documentary, is that he's promoting charter schools and promoting choice, as they call it. And that essentially our school system is too broke to fix. And there's a lot there to unpack that you could go in any direction you wanted, which is, of course, what that paragraph is for.
I can fix the school system in minutes.
You could fix Harmony, could fix it in minutes.
Just give me a budget, man. Give me that budget that you're giving to the army, the military. I will fix your education system in minutes.
Illegalize guns right away.
Wow. I'd love to hear about that.
But what I immediately think about is that,
I'm not running for office, by the way.
I was thinking about how essentially the thing about yoga is that maybe we come to it thinking that it will fix us because our lives become complicated. And often blowing something up is a solution rather than, say, organization. And again, it comes back to this dynamic of, can the hero yoga, in this instance, the embodiment of yoga, can the hero yoga save us from complication?
Let me just add to that a little to ground it in reality.
School system.
Well, it's taken out of the theoretics. No, but I think what you're saying, I mean, what comes up for me when I hear what you're saying is this idea that as very earnest, misguided young people, we go to India, we practice yoga, it takes over our lives, it becomes our life. We start to give up all kinds of things like onions and garlic and, drugs and alcohol and all kinds of things and friends and family and just do yoga, right? Become very one-pointed in our focus. But in a way, we're kind of trying to blow up the past or get rid of it. We're running, this idea of freedom from something. We're trying to get freedom from our past. And really, we should be focused on freedom to something, which is actually we have to go and make peace with our past or integrate who we were, where we came from. Yeah, in order to find freedom to wherever we are in a way, right? So instead of running from something, we're able to actually heal when we slow down and start to bring those things with us. Not that we need to do drugs and alcohol and,
God forbid,
all those things, but we have to heal what was underneath those things instead of just trying to put a stopper on the bottle and pretend that, it's not going to explode in 20 years from now or something.
Throw the bottle away.
What do you think about that?
If I understand you, I lost you a tiny bit at the end. So are you kind of thinking about almost two different possibilities? One is that, you've got yoga as a erasure of
panacea.
Yeah, but just totally getting rid of, as you said, getting rid of all of your past dramas and traumas and kind of making sense of them because now I'm above it all. I'm doing my yoga and I don't, Uncle Jerry who wants to talk to me about Trump at Thanksgiving. I'm above that. I don't have to deal with that anymore. When in fact, that's really just trying to suppress something.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're trying to suppress negative experiences. Yeah, I definitely think so. I mean, there's a lot of escapism that we, especially the three of us, because I think the vast majority of people who ever in the modern world who ever encounter yoga, they do so
in a very like limited, controlled way. You know, they go and take a class or whatever. Whereas the three of us have had kind of unusually over the top kind of
Over the top.
Full immersive baptism experience.
Yeah, full immersion. And so, yes, you get very deep into something with the immersive experience, of course. At the same time, I basically just completely agree with what you said, is that you're not, I don't even know. I mean, I guess it's a recipe for disaster to try to completely suppress who you are and try to reshape it and reform it in, you know, like we do under many different circumstances, you know, whether it's for a partner that you want to be a different person because that's what you think that they want, or whatever it is. Our practice of yoga and all the different disciplines that are contained within that are hopefully about learning to be in our lives in a just a very radically different way, kind of awake way, present. That, you know, it's a very hard thing to even articulate. That's why things like the Yoga Sutra and all these yoga shastras are so difficult to, you know, they get so much attention because they are so profound. It's very difficult to even begin to articulate how remote the experience of being present actually is to us as a regular everyday thing. We do experience being present, particularly, you know, for those of you like you're loving your animals, like, you know, maybe in moments where you're like really there with your animal or with a lover, or, you know, but for the most part, our minds are so incredibly supersonically creating this world of meaning around us, driven by ignorance of the underlying nature of things, and always fighting for a little bit of like fighting ultimately a losing battle, which is to make myself content or fulfilled at all times by controlling external circumstances. I'm not going to succeed with that. What happens with the yoga too, which is interesting, because asana has became in the modern period, you know, yoga seems to be asana. So somebody who does like kick-ass asana practice, that is equated with advancement as a human, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But in fact, really, you're just being, this is where we started the conversation. You're just, you know, promoting, you're buying into celebrity of another sort. Because yes, there is some beauty in the movement of energy and so forth. There is something very valuable and powerful about it, but the projection or the idolization of that is not anywhere near the experience of just being present. That's what we're trying to achieve, is actually being and training ourselves to have the ability to be present in individual moments, you know, so that when negative emotional states arise in us, which they inevitably do, and anger and frustration and jealousy and worse, that we see them for what they are, that they are these just, they're like mirages. They're just arising in our minds where they're not necessarily there. They don't have to take over our experience. You know, we don't have to stay angry, basically. And the part of it that we're coming back then to the Jesus theme, which I think is very, very powerful, is that, you know, I don't spend a lot of time thinking about Jesus. I'll be perfectly honest. It's not like but at the same time, if you do, as you clearly have, Russell, the thing that stands out about it is like, what does it even mean for like an individual to operate purely on the basis of love and caring and concern? You know, as a model, is that like a role model for us? Or is that just something that's so radical, like we can't even begin to understand? I don't know the answer.
I think you've said so many beautiful things. I mean, one thing that really, you know, I heard is this idea of when you're being present and really being present, your mind's not busy making meaning And it's
That's
also
right.
not busy desiring or trying to escape. It's just like in the moment,
Right.
being present.
Right.
And when you're really present, then it allows space for radical compassion, connection, love
Yeah.
to
Right.
to genuinely arise and be there, because you're not making meaning and you're not desiring anything to be different than exactly what it is.
That's beautifully put. Yes. I feel that to be totally accurate. Yes.
It's extraordinary because that is such a beautiful value to have and also to seek in the world. And it boggles my mind that people elected an orange monstrosity and projected onto that figure a Christ-like savior archetype, and said this person will throw the moneylenders out of the temple, because it's always about Judaism for me. And
Yeah.
they'll throw the moneylenders out of the temple and blow up whatever's too complicated, because it's too complicated to think about, trans people. It's really complicated, and it's like it's confusing. It's like, instead of thinking about it or talking to someone who is trans and understanding their position and how fucked up their life is, we're just going to blow it all up and shove everyone into understandable boxes, woke, right. And so again, this kind of urge to project the Superman figure onto complicated situations rather than being present and sitting with what is and trying to understand what is seems to be the kind of crucible that we live in.
Everybody always trying to dumb everything down. And, it's so like, it seems to be like a basic requirement that you have a black and white opinion about this or that. The advent of just the last 5 years of social media has created this meta reality where our literal reality is now, it's not that there's more injustice and war and terrible shit going on in the world than there was 10 years ago, but it is now being broadcast to all of us constantly. That doesn't actually mean that there's more of it, by the way. It just means that it is now constant. We need, of course, to learn to live with that. And I don't think that the way of living with that is, this is like, I don't want to make kind of a totally specious connection, but the fact that we're all aware of, we have this simulation of awareness of world events, because we really don't know what the fuck is going on in the Gulf
Right.
of Oman, but for some reason we think we do because we read something about it this morning. We don't really. What we have is a constant narration machine of infinite complexity in our minds that is telling us, like, this is exactly who I am. And therefore, when I experience things, I've bought into the sort of robust reality of a self that needs to be coddled, it needs to be reinforced, it needs to be happy. So when I'm like seeking happiness, I'm seeking it for an actual fictional character, and I'm seeking it for someone that can ultimately never be satisfied because it's not real in the first place. So this sort of expanding and ever exponentially proliferating complexity of the world that we live in day to day because of communication devices, for example. Well, at the same time, this very same phenomenon provides us with the technology to do exactly what we're doing right now, which is a wonderful conversation between friends. I deeply love you guys. I mean, I've had such affection for you since, I guess, we hung out in New York City. We don't have to go into all the details, so it wasn't really like a peak success moment in my life. It was pretty bleak. And so you guys were like just so dear to me because of that. I can be in that, and enjoy that and see your faces because the technology is there. It's neither good nor bad. It's giving us this super cool opportunity. Same thing with the yoga. It's like the technology that we are engaged in with the transformation of our minds and bodies and breaths. That's why there are so many stories in India about malevolent yogis. It's almost like even though it starts to become sort of a joke, like because the cultural figure of the yogi in India in classical literature is almost like the fool in medieval European. They're supposed to be they're transgressive. They're supposed to be there to like fuck with people and stuff, but they're supposed to be cautionary. Like, if you don't be a good little boy, we're going to
like Vedavyasa. He does that with the Pandavas. He's kind of that figure.
Which one?
Vedavyasa. And the Mahabharata with the Pandava brothers. He is kind of, I hadn't thought of it that way, as a kind of fool to the king.
Or like a trickster.
He can say anything. He's the one. He's the guy who can say anything. I guess that's something that's interesting to me as a contemporary topic in yoga. And you are, I think, Harmony, kind of, you are kind of an event. I mean, you not personally, because you are still just Harmony, but you are also Harmony, the event. And the event around yoga is like, it's a wonderful and interesting and, powerful position to be in, because you're going to suggest to people, like, when you do yoga, this is like the kind of things that could open your imagination, what you might do. Probably the most valuable thing that we as teachers, I say this because all three of us do that to some degree, is steer people toward coming into a profound seeking to be present, seeking to be here and immediate. And from that position of immediacy, finding the inner strength and tremendous power in that. So it is therapeutic because it's just plain old good for you. And it is also the way to start being of greater service to those around you. I keep kind of wanting to explain, like, and you want to be of more service to those around you because, and I seem to always like kind of run out of things to say then. I'm not really sure why. I'm really not so sure why. Like, I mean, I guess it's just like, if not that, then what? Yeah. What are you going to do with your life? If you're not trying to make, the world better for the people around you, and then what else are you doing?
Yeah.
One of the things that you said, I was thinking of the Gulf of Oman and Houthi rebels being blown up for whatever reason. We're not really sure. And like, you don't really know until you get there. And then I thought of this film, The Fog of War, about Robert McNamara, the documentary.
Oh, yeah.
And like, you can be there and still have no idea what's going on.
Yeah.
And it's just because being an individual in a complicated system, you look around and you try and organize things just to make sense of them, but still might not make any sense. So like Robert McNamara was a numbers guy from Ford Motors who just took that bureaucratic numbers system to war and organized war, and through his rationalist mind made extraordinarily horrific war crimes because that's what the numbers said to do.
Right.
That if you bomb Japanese cities to 70%, firebomb, then you will have such and such consequence. That's what the numbers say. So that's what we're going to do. And it reminds me of Paul Simon's quote, "I was Robert McNamara into submission." And like, you can be Robert McNamara into submission by rationalist organization as well. And so you've heard all my anxiety about yoga and teachers, and I'm like, well, maybe rightly so. There's also anxiety and suspicion to be had for overthinking it.
I mean, people who find themselves in positions of great authority then turn out to be real shitheels, and they it's a terrible blow to everybody, because then they were like, they were supposed to be perfect. I guess, yeah, it's like I'm not so well plugged in to even the so-called modern yoga world to even know, are there icons and cults of personality brewing around out there. I hear about it here and there. It doesn't seem to be like something to lose much sleep over, though. I would say, Russell.
As long as you're not in the cult.
Right, as long as you're not in the cult. Yeah, I mean,
You can
I
sleep
ended up
soundly
watching,
then.
I ended up watching like several cult documentaries with my daughter over this break. She's home from college, and I'm just always blown away, like how people get into it and how deep they get into it. I'm like, at
Yeah.
what point are they gonna just say this is enough? And they don't, and they don't, and they don't. It's incredible. But I think it's also a really, really helpful thing to watch because on some maybe smaller scale, we're all doing that, right? With our like interpersonal struggles. I've got like, Claude is I didn't like the way she spoke to me, and I didn't, I had all sorts of associations with that. And so I have a grudge and I feel like I need to be, apologized to, and I'm not getting apology, like how long could I carry that on and keep fueling that delusion, that, delusionary, way of thinking? I could carry it on for a long time, really. So I could kind of be in the thrall of my own cult. I'm in the thrall of my own, cult of personality. It's the cult of this personality. At every level, we have to just be more, we need to be inspired by each other without doing all this projection, as you called it.
What I love about Claude, your wife, is when I first met her in 2001, and she came to Brooklyn College to give a talk about her work, which was phenomenal. And I had said something about performance art because I had got my bachelor's degree in performance art.
Yeah.
And she said, yeah, I think people really use these crits to try and make themselves look intelligent.
She got to rip you a new one, right?
Yeah, I just want to thank you, John, and thank Harmony for also giving me a platform to try and make myself look intelligent. And just thank you for bearing with me, and all my best to Claude.
Well, thank you for that. You didn't make yourself look like anything. I think is like all super interesting. Still not really sure where you are at with your Christianity, but you'll fill me in at some point. Bottom line is, like, depending on who I'm talking to, I'll either say, oh yeah, everybody's got to like go their own journey, or I'll say, we're surrounded by, enlightened angelic beings all time, and we need them. We badly need them, and we thrive by remaining open to them. But me, I'm just trying to figure stuff out.
I love that, John. Oh my gosh. And we're going to meet again and talk about the angelic beings, that we are beings of light and beings of perhaps darkness that we're surrounded by all the time, and how we need their energies.
Yeah, let's do that.
Throw a beautiful gem in right at the end. Everyone can go away and start opening up to their senses to perceiving.
That's all it is like, like yoga or all these tutorials for being open. And people think it's because like we're filling in something that's like created. It's just a tear down. The whole shit. It's a tear down, as they say about old properties. We need to, that is my final view on this. We need to always start from scratch. And that is this present moment of whatever, and our yoga is very good at like directing us back to that sort of stuff. So anyway, I'll stick with it.
You two may be like angelic beings over there, but here I'm getting the feeling that whenever I walk into any situation in a yoga environment, I'm supposed to be thin, emaciated, in pain, suffering, poor, meek, and most of all, in protest against the government. So I'm going to do the best
You
I
are
can.
supposed to be?
Well, yeah, that's,
Some government
one,
somewhere.
two swords will do, I think he said.
Mm. You mean like along with being thin and having certain sort of agenda of appearance, you also have to virtue signal aggressively.
Yes.
This is like the most toxic thing of all, personally, I think, is really, but yeah, what to do about it? I don't know. It beats me. Other than make sure that you associate yourself with very, very critically thinking, intelligent people like you, Russell.
You, John.
No, but seriously, like you have to, because you want to be make yourself available. Otherwise, the tendency is just to buy into whatever narrative is being presented to you as the most desirable, I think. And I'm not sure that made any sense, but anyway.
Totally made sense. Yes. And keep a sense of humor about it all, right?
Exactly. You must. You must. All right. Well, thanks for chatting.
Thank you, John. It's been such a pleasure, as always.
Yeah.
Our absolute honor.
Couldn't you just spend all day with Dr. John Campbell? I could. He's just such a phenomenal human being. I wanted to remind you, I have a 5-day free breathwork challenge. It's starting next week on Easter Monday, April 1st. We're going for 5 full days, and then there's a free masterclass on Saturday, April 6th. Catch all the recordings if you can't join live, but I hope you'll join me live. We're doing Zoom meetings, and all of the details can be found in the show notes on my Instagram bio, Harmony Slater Official, or at Finding Harmony Podcast. And I would love for you to join. This is going to be an amazing, transformative experience. Come on into the Finding Harmony community, join the 5-day challenge with me, and we're going to have an amazing, amazing time. I hope to see you there. We start next week. Don't forget, sign up before Monday. That's it. We've concluded another episode of the Finding Harmony podcast. I just want to thank you so much for doing the work that changes the world, starting with yourself. It truly does make a huge difference. Please make sure you have your automatic downloads turned on wherever you listen so you don't miss any of the upcoming episodes. I have so much more magic I can't wait to share with you. Lastly, if you're on Instagram, I love connecting and hearing from you. So come on over and say hello at Finding Harmony Podcast. And you can also come say hello to me personally at Harmony Slater Official. Thank you again for being here. I cannot wait to share more with you in our next episode.